Hey guys, thanks for coming to the channel. You know, early winter is upon us. We're in late fall right now. Early winter's coming. But late fall and early winter is a prime time for the technique that I'm going to talk about today. And it's not just a technique that you just go out and throw in and catch some fish on, but it's a technique that actually creates big bass, winning bass if you're fishing tournament situations, large bass. And it's proven in my life to be a big time catcher this time of year. So we're talking about water temperatures, you know, low 50s, upper 40s is when this technique shines. And it also shines in the pre-spawn. And you may even have seen some people do this particular technique on the elite field and in MLF and some of these other pro fishing circuits to win some major tournaments, even the Bassmaster Classic. And the technique is something that you just don't hear much talk about anymore. But there's people who are doing it. I'm doing it. Other people that I know that are very successful bass fishing are doing it. And it's just something that's not really talked about too awful much. And that's because people are just trying to keep a lid on it because, you know, it feels like it gives them, you know, a little bit of an advantage if they know some things that other people don't know. And it does, because if you're doing techniques that other people aren't doing, you're going to have more opportunities to catch those fish because they're less educated than the fish that see the same lures every day. So I'll give you a little example here. I fished a tournament last weekend, which I won locally. Fished by myself. It was a buddy tournament. I fished by myself and won the tournament. And I was trying to catch these fish on finesse baits because the body of water we were fishing usually fishes pretty good for finesse baits this particular time of year. And so I did that, and I caught like one fish on it. And I looked around and looked around, and pretty much everybody that I came across was doing the same type of thing. They were all flipping something finesse worms, Ned rigs, drop shots, small jigs, all that type of thing. And so I thought, I got to do something different. And so I went back to an old technique that I've used for years this time of year. And it is slow rolling a spinnerbait. What does that mean, to slow roll a spinnerbait? Well, that means simply taking a spinnerbait that's heavy enough to fish the depth that you're targeting, throwing it out, letting it go all the way to the bottom, pop your rod and reel it as slow as you can possibly reel it and keep the blade moving. So you can reel it too slow and the blade will just do like this on the back. So it has to be reeled fast enough that the blade is still moving. Now, back in the day, there was a spinnerbait called, well, I'll show you one, a ledge buster, right? A ledge buster, several tournaments were won on that back in the day. And what makes a ledge buster special? Well, most of them have one blade and a really heavy head. And what that does is that one blade keeps the bait from lifting too much, especially a willow leaf blade like is on there. You know, the rounder the blade, the more lift it has. The more cup a blade has, the more lift it has. So you can have, you know, two willow leaf blades, one that doesn't have very much cup in it. When I mean cup, I mean how much of a bowl there is on the back side of the blade. And another spinnerbait that has a lot of cup, one that has a little bit of cup. So the more cup it has, the more it's going to lift. The rounder the blade is, the more it's going to lift. So a Colorado blade lifts the most, followed by an Indiana blade and turtle blades, and then willow leaf blades lift the least. So most slow rolling situations, unless you're in a shallow water fishery that just doesn't have a lot of deep access, like a small lake or a small pond or a river or something like that, where, you know, the fish are just not going to be deeper than 6 or 8 feet even in the wintertime. But if you're fishing deeper than that, you're probably going to want a willow leaf blade on your spinnerbait. If you're fishing shallower than that, you can get away with some of these other blade designs, you know, especially if you're in a pond or a lake that has a lot of small bait in it, then you may want to go down to two little Indiana blades or a single Indiana blade or Indiana Colorado combo on a 3/8 or half-ounce spinnerbait in those situations where you can move it, you know, slow as possible and still keep it towards the bottom. But in most lake situations where you're dealing with deeper water and deep points and the fish are wintering in, you know, 10 to 25 foot of water or so, then you're probably going to want to fish 3/4 ounce minimum, probably an ounce or maybe even an ounce and a quarter spinnerbait to get down to these depths. You know, everybody's dragging a jig around, everybody's dragging a drop shot or shaky head, some Carolina rigs, Ned rigs, things like that in the wintertime, or throwing, you know, Alabama rig if that's allowed in your state, or suspending jerk baits. And a lot of people just plain aren't doing this. So following that story of last weekend, I picked up the heavy spinnerbait. Not this one. I was throwing Jason Christie Covert Elite half-ounce spinnerbait in chartreuse blue and white. Is one of my favorite spinnerbaits. And it seems to catch them pretty much in every watercolor and temperature so far. And I just thought, well, I'll just throw this because everybody else is throwing the Ned rig, the shaky head, the drop shots, and all that stuff. And I wasn't having much success doing that, which usually I have success doing it, but I wasn't. So I picked this spinnerbait up and made about 3 casts with it and caught a 4-pounder. And then I fished a little while longer and I caught a 3-something. And then at the end of the day, I ended up catching another 4-pounder. And I won that tournament going away. And the reason I won that tournament going away was because I was willing to do something different than everybody else and show them a technique that they hadn't seen before. And not just, you know, I'm not just guessing here. Experience, years and years of experience of trying different things, let me know that slow rolling that spinnerbait, while not guaranteed, could play a big role in fishing this particular time of year. It also works, like I said, really good in the pre-spawn. And who did it in the pre-spawn? Well, Jason Christie did it with a 1-ounce spinnerbait on Grand Lake when he finished second in the Classic to Edwin Evers several years ago. And he wasn't fishing really that deep. He was fishing dirtier water, but his key was he wanted the heavy spinnerbait so that he could move the spinnerbait fast across the bottom and generate a reaction strike in the dirty water because something, boom, is in their face and they react to it. So it's not just a technique that works in cold water. It will also work in warm water. But in warm water, you want heavier yet spinnerbait, just like Jason Christie moved it fast. In warmer water, you want to move that bait quicker, so especially in clear water, so that the fish can't get a real good look at it. Throw it out, let it go to the bottom. Adjust your weights. I mean, you'll have to play with the weights because it depends on, you know, what line size you're using. If you're using fluorocarbon or monofilament floats, fluorocarbon sinks, so the same pound test is going to run different depth than the other depending on the line you're throwing. But generally, if you're throwing, you know, maybe like a 16-pound fluorocarbon on a 7-foot-ish medium heavy fast rod, slow rolling a spinnerbait, you can usually get down pretty good, and then you just adjust your weight based on how deep you do need to fish. Half-ounce down to probably about 8-9 feet or so. May need to go up to 5/8 for, you know, 8 or 9 to 12 feet or so. If you get deeper than that, you want to be 3/4 plus. And if you're really deep, you know, you're going to want like a 1 ounce, or you may want to throw a 1 ounce like this one if you're trying to move it fast along the bottom and elicit a strike. See, a lot of people will throw in warmer weather, they'll throw a swim bait or they'll throw a crankbait, and they're moving along pretty good clip on a heavy head with a swim bait and a deep diver with a crankbait. And then you drop the spinnerbait on them, which they're not seeing in that specific type of situation. And a bass, being a curious animal, doesn't have hands, right? So he doesn't go over and pick it up, so he puts it in his mouth to say, what the heck is that I've not been seeing around here lately? Let's taste that and see if that's any good to eat. And so that's what doing something different for these fish in these situations will do for you. It'll get you more bites. And the spinnerbait is notorious for catching a bigger fish than a lot of other baits. You know, a spinnerbait and a jig, a big crankbait are going to catch, you know, top water, are going to catch the biggest fish when they're in those particular zones. So this is a technique you need to go out and try if you haven't tried it. Takes a little bit of patience, takes a little bit of feel to feel that blade moving down at these depths. But if you try it in the right situations, then you will catch more fish, you'll catch bigger fish. Again, if you want to watch my channel on a regular basis, please hit the subscribe button, the like button. Share it with your friends on your social media pages. That'll help grow the channel. I would appreciate it much. Thanks for watching, and have a blessed day.